welcome you to our monthly manna for the month of August. Every month, for just 7 or 8 or 9 minutes, I like to share a thought that perhaps you could feast on and think about and process during the coming weeks of this month. And this month, I want to share something that I developed a number of years ago as I had just joined the faculty of St. Augustine's University. There was freshman orientation. They would bring the freshmen in for 1 week ahead of the rest of the student body. They called it Learning to Learn Camp, sort of a boot camp for freshmen. As I was involved in the Department of Philosophy and Religion, they asked me to do something along that line or ethics. And so a thought came to me and I developed it. I used this same teaching for a number of years, working with Pastor Chris Jones here in Raleigh at the Ship of Zion. They had a gang intervention program funded by the city, and I taught 3 courses in this 8-week training. You had to be active in a gang, and the gang that they were involved in was the Bloods. And so I would go 3 different times over 8 weeks and do a teaching. And one of the teachings I would do, the first one I would do with the Bloods, was the same one I did with freshmen at St. Augustine's College. And I haven't taught it in many years, but it occurs to me it would be a good thing for us to do in the month of August. It's called 4 C's plus 1. 4 C's plus 1. And I'm calling this a formula for making wise life decisions. A formula for making wise life decisions. Let's go down the 4 C's and then the plus 1. The first C has to do with the idea of circumstances. Circumstances at this moment. What's going on around you? What's going on around you in your life, in your family, in your community? What's going on around you? When I was teaching the Bloods and we would come to the first C, they would talk about some of the things. Right where we were in a kind of a tough side of town, they said, well, within a mile or 2 of where we're standing right now, there's some drug dealers, there's prostitution, there's some gangs active and in the community, probably outstanding on a street corner. So that was the circumstances. The second C is context. Not what's going on around you, what's going on within you. Your context, what are you thinking? What are you feeling at this moment as you respond to your circumstance? And we talked about in that neighborhood particularly, if you were a school child, and you're in school, but all day long you're thinking about what's going to happen when you leave and step into those circumstances. Maybe somebody wants to fight you. Maybe there's some conflict. Maybe things at home are very difficult. And so your circumstances affect your context. What I'm calling your context, what's going on inside of you? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? You really can't learn in the context of fear. It's hard to concentrate at work or at school or in the community when circumstances have caused you to feel that you're in upheaval. The third C, after circumstances and context, it leads us to a very important one. It's choices. Based on your circumstances and your context, what's going on inside, we all have to make choices. Now, there's all kinds of choices. You make them every day. Some of them aren't very consequential. Whatever clothes you wore today, a blue shirt, a red shirt, a green dress, it doesn't really matter. Those choices are minimal. What you had for breakfast, it probably doesn't matter very much. But moral choices, choices that affect you and other people, choices that may impact your future, those choices are very significant. And I would love for you to make wise, informed, careful choices. And the fourth C, which you may have already guessed after circumstances, context, and then choices, is consequences. All moral choices have consequences. It's the direct result of our choices. Think about this for just a moment as you're listening to me today. The life that you're living at this very moment, the life that you have right now, this moment today, is the direct result of all the choices you've made up to this moment in time. All of the choices, particularly moral choices that you've made in the last 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years has placed you in the situation you're in right this very day. So choices are essential because they have consequences. And then I have a +1 on this formula. 4 C's plus 1 equals. And the +1, or the fifth C, is Christ. Is it possible that if Christ is in your life, if you've given your life to Jesus Christ, if he dwells within you, in what ways might that impact, regardless of your circumstances, what's going on around you, or the context, what's going on inside of you, your thoughts and your feelings, would having Christ in your life impact the choices you make and therefore affect the consequences that you face? Let me tell you a story that I told those students many, many years ago, and I told the gang, the Bloods, when I would teach them. It's a true story. It happened in 1996. It was a young couple by the name of Brian and Amy. You could Google this when we're finished. Brian and Amy, high school sweethearts from Wyckoff, New Jersey. Fairly wealthy community. If you're from the Northeast, you may be aware of Wyckoff, New Jersey. They loved each other, and in high school, their teachers thought so highly of them, thought they had a great future, whatever it would be. Brian was an athlete, as I recall. Amy was a cheerleader, and they looked great at the school prom, and at graduation they were beaming, and their families, both of their families, so proud of them, Brian and Amy. After graduation, they went to separate universities, but they still were in love, and they stayed connected every day. She went to the University of Delaware, and he went to Gettysburg College. It may be a university now. So they were a few hours apart, but they still loved each other, and they believed they would have a great life together in the future. The challenge was that, as often happens, emotional intimacy can lead to physical intimacy, and Brian and Amy expressed their love for each other sexually, and they began to, whenever they could get together or be together, express their great love for each other as married couples do, and they were sexually intimate. Problem was, after a few months during their freshman year in 2 different universities, a few hours apart, Amy tells Brian that she's pregnant. Now they are both astounded and shocked and terrified. Somehow they thought they had been careful and safe, but here she is pregnant, and they don't know what to do about it. They don't know who to talk to about it. His mother had told him, his father had told him, don't you ever get a girl pregnant. Never come and tell us that. He said, and her parents, strong family, told her, don't you better never. And they were terrified, and so they kept it to themselves. And 3 months and 6 months went by, and then 8 months. In her 9th month, they still had told nobody. Amazingly, she was a tiny, petite young lady, but by wearing baggy clothes, her roommate at the University of Delaware didn't even know she was pregnant. She didn't socialize a lot with her. She was very careful when she dressed in their dorm room that she was always alone or in the bathroom. The Saturday, a week before Thanksgiving, Brian and Amy finally found a solution to their problem. They met at a hotel halfway between their universities, still in Delaware, rented a hotel room. She went into labor. Brian helped to deliver the child. And when he delivered the child, he put it in a garbage bag, went to the dumpster in the back, killed the baby, threw it away. It was a traumatic experience for both of them, but after they cleaned up, she got in her car and drove back to the University of Delaware. Brian got in his car, drove back to Gettysburg College, and finally their problem, which had tormented them for 9 months, was over. But was it really? Amy, back in her dorm room, began to hemorrhage. Her roommate panicked. She called 911. The ambulance came. They took Amy to the hospital. And the secret they would not tell their friends or family, the doctor in 5 minutes said, "Young lady, you've had a baby. Where is your baby?" The police got involved, an investigation began. Brian is arrested, Amy is arrested, and that which was so private, they did not want their own families to know, the whole world know, and I'm telling you about it. And it happened in 1996. Now, when I shared this story with the college students, St. Augustine's University, or the gang members of the Bloods in Southeast Raleigh, I asked them the question. Here it is. If we walk through the 4 C's plus 1, how might this story have been different? The first C, circumstances. And I would ask them, what was going on around them? Well, you know, they're in love and they're dating in high school, and now they live apart in college, so they only see each other maybe on a weekend, and then so that was their circumstances. What was their context? Well, after she got pregnant, they're terrified. They're embarrassed. They're afraid. They don't want to let down their parents, their family, his coach in high school, their teachers who thought they would do so well upon graduation. The pressure of the world is crushing them. So what choice did they make? Initially, they told nobody. What choice could they have made? And my students, or those in the gang, very intelligent young men and women, said, well, they could have told their parents. And even if they were angry with them and yelled at them and slapped them, I think their parents would have helped them. Somebody else would raise their hand and said, well, could have gotten an abortion. It is true. Since 1973 in the United States, in the Roe versus Wade agreement, the Supreme Court has legalized abortion in America. Now, it began just for those in the first trimester in a crisis situation, but now, all these years later, more children have been aborted in America than the entire population of Canada. Canada's population is about 33 million people. We have aborted more, closer to 40 million babies in America since 1973. But to the point of this discussion, that would have been legal. I would ask the class or the gang, anything else they could have done, any other choice that could have been made. And some would say in either of those groups, they could have gotten married. They could have gotten married. Is it hard to be married and in college with a newborn baby? Absolutely. Is it impossible? Surely it's not. Other people have done it. Sometimes you might have to step out of school for a semester. You might have to go part-time. Maybe one will go and the other will work, and after graduation, the other goes back and the other takes care of it. There's a lot of ways to do it, but what choice did they make? They killed their baby. And the consequences of that are horrific. And then I come to the 5th C, plus 1. I said, would it make any difference for Brian and Amy if Christ was in their lives? If they were following, and again, students would say, or those I present would say, well, maybe they wouldn't have had sex in the first part. Maybe they would have followed the Bible and abstained and not had sex until they got married. That's a possibility. Still possible. Probably the best choice of all would have been that. Or they would have perhaps gotten married, told their parents, taken whatever backlash, but never, ever would they have taken the life of their child. Christ would have made a difference. I'm going to close now. What are you facing today? What decisions do you have to make? I offer you this formula to make wise choices and decisions. Be aware of your circumstances. What's going on around you? We have a lot of social upheaval right now in our country, in our world. We've survived for a little over a year at this taping, a pandemic of the COVID-19 virus that has affected everybody's family all over the world. Hopefully we're getting near the end, but 600,000 plus Americans have died in this pandemic, and those people, their families are still grieving their loss. That's our circumstances. What's your context? What's going on inside of you? How are you processing this? What do you feel about this? Has it made you more resolute? Has it made you more determined, or are you overcome with depression? You may need to see a counselor, a therapist, a friend, someone you can share your heart with. What choices are you making? Are you making good choices right now? Because I'm telling you, any moral choice you make will lead you to consequences that can be wonderful or they can be terrible. And now, the fifth C. Is Jesus Christ the Lord of your life? If you've never bowed your head and prayed and said, Lord Jesus, please forgive my sins. Please come into my life. Be the Lord of my life. If you've never prayed that prayer, do it now. Do it now. For that choice will supersede all the other choices you've ever made. That decision will prove to be the single wisest decision of your entire life, because it's going to affect your life every day you have left on this earth, and it's also going to bring you all the way to heaven for all eternity. God bless you. Have a great month, and ponder the 4 C's plus 1 that you might make wise choices and decisions for the rest of your life.